Why does the United States pay higher drug prices than other countries? Because America's the only country in the world where 340B hospitals mark up drug prices and PBM middlemen charge billions in hidden fees. Meanwhile, Americans subsidize the research and development for new cures. Other countries benefit, but don't pay their fair share. Crack down on the middlemen. End the free riding. Lower drug prices. Go to balancethescales.org to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
With the Venmo debit card, you can Venmo everything. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit venmo.me/debit to learn more. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. The card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
It's a little jarring to look at a map of the country right now and trace the spread of measles.
2025 is now the worst year for measles cases in this country in more than 3 decades. That's according to new data from the Centers for Disease Control.
Maybe you've heard the headlines that the last time the U.S. saw this many measles cases was 1992, that there are more than 1,300 infections, and the year's only half over.
17 states have reported outbreaks this year. Health experts fear the U.S. may lose its status as having eliminated measles. There are also large...
But more shocking than the numbers, to me, is how many infections just didn't have to happen. The CDC says that more than 90% of people diagnosed were classified as unvaccinated or unknown. And it almost seems like some people are proud of that fact. Right now, you look around, you can find these video testimonials gathered by anti-vaccine advocates. They show family members of children who've died during this outbreak, just days removed from their raw grief. Parents cry about the children they've lost, and then they reject vaccination. They say the measles wasn't that bad because they have other children and they survived. They even say, wrongly, that a measles infection can make your immune system stronger. In reality, survivors have weakened immune systems for years. I really believe the stories we tell each other in times like this matter. And it was not that long ago that different kinds of stories were breaking through.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Health Committee.
This is a guy named Krawitt.
My name is Krawitt, and I respectfully will yield 1 minute of my 5 to my son.
10 years back, when there was a measles outbreak in California, it was his family that became the face of what was going on. More specifically, it was the face of his grade school son, Rhett.
My name is Rhett Krawitt. Vaccines save lives. Leukemia is cancer in my blood. Cancer cells are the bad guys. For 3.5 years, I took chemo to get the bad guys out. I had medicine.
See, Rhett didn't have measles, but he had survived cancer. That left him immunocompromised, vulnerable. And in 2014, when measles spread, first at Disneyland and then in the wider community, Rhett and Carl were living in the least vaccinated county in the state. So they went to their school board and the state house to advocate for a law that would make it harder for families to avoid mandated shots.
He's just 6 years old, but this Bay Area boy is at the center of a debate over vaccinations. His parents are...
For a couple years there, the Krawitt family, they were a thing.
A Little Voice is raising big concerns and a message to the anti-vaccine community.
Soon, we will say gone with the measles.
That is 7-year-old Rhett Krawitt going before school district officials in Marin County. He is a cancer survivor.
You started giving this speech. Do you still remember it? Like, could you still do it now?
Parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so cute.
Rhett is 17 now. He doesn't do this kind of public speaking anymore. Not really.
I mean, you're like this cherub who's like 6 or 7 years old. The sweetest voice. You would always be in a tie, I think.
No jacket, but just the tie. Collared shirt, tie, and then some form of jeans.
What did you think when you were like talking in front of a bunch of adults? Where did you first speak?
The one that I remember, I think, was the school board one. I remember having to like stand on a box to be able to like reach the microphone. I feel like there's a lot of fear with public speaking for kids, but I honestly think that I was so young that I didn't really understand that fear. And so I wasn't feeling that fear, which is great because then I was able to do it.
Rhett's speeches, they actually ended up changing things. Kids got vaccinated in Rhett's hometown and then throughout California. It's enough to make you wonder, why isn't this happening now? Today on the show, at a moment when it feels like public health is going backwards, does Rhett Krawitt's story offer a way forward? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This episode is brought to you by Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The future of religious freedom is at a crossroads. The same groups behind Project 2025 are working relentlessly to impose a Christian nationalist agenda on the laws and the lives of the American people. The wall between church and state is the last safeguard standing in their way. For over 75 years, Americans United has been a powerful but quiet force fighting to preserve church-state separation, freedom without favor, and equality without exception for every single American. Americans United stands up for your right to believe and to live as you choose, so long as you don't harm others. Whether you care about gender-affirming health care, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, or supporting public schools, church-state separation is fundamental to nearly every constitutional freedom. Americans United exists to protect that separation. You can take action and join Americans United today by donating any dollar amount, and your support will be doubled. Join Americans United and help defend the fundamental freedoms that protect us all. Learn more and join the fight at au.org/slate. au.org/slate. This episode is brought to you by Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The future of religious freedom is at a crossroads. The same groups behind Project 2025 are working relentlessly to impose a Christian nationalist agenda on the laws and the lives of the American people. The wall between church and state is the last safeguard standing in their way. For over 75 years, Americans United has been a powerful but quiet force fighting to preserve church-state separation, freedom without favor, and equality without exception for every single American. Americans United stands up for your right to believe and to live as you choose, so long as you don't harm others. Whether you care about gender-affirming health care, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, or supporting public schools, church-state separation is fundamental to nearly every constitutional freedom. Americans United exists to protect that separation. You can take action and join Americans United today by donating any dollar amount, and your support will be doubled. Join Americans United and help defend the fundamental freedoms that protect us all. Learn more and join the fight at au.org/slate. au.org/slate.
History not only shapes America's past, it can help you understand its present. The American Scandal podcast brings to life some of the biggest controversies in U.S. history, taking you deep into the heart of America's dark side to answer the question, how did this happen, and what lessons can society learn from it? The latest season, Ruby Ridge Standoff, explores an event that sowed the seeds for the rise of the modern radical right. In 1992, in a remote corner of Idaho, federal law enforcement agents surrounded a small cabin. Their target, Randy Weaver, a survivalist living off the grid to wait out the apocalypse. He was wanted on a simple weapons charge, but the situation escalated into a tragic and deadly standoff. Ruby Ridge has since become a rallying cry for those opposed to government overreach and has fueled decades of distrust and violent anti-government sentiment. Follow American Scandal on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge all episodes of American Scandal's Ruby Ridge Standoff early and ad-free right now on Wondery Plus. This year's measles outbreak, it started in this small community in Texas, a Mennonite community. And more importantly, it's a community with a very high rate of exemptions from vaccines. You know, one of the county's local public school districts, which is quite small, but it has the highest vaccine exemption rate in the state. It's like 48%. Carl, how does that exemption rate compare to what your home county looked like
a decade ago?
Before 2015, Marin County had among the lowest vaccination rates in the nation. And in some of our communities, for example, out in West Marin, that vaccination rate was as low as 40 or 50% in some school districts. You know, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a public health officer. So I look at it from a very personal standpoint, which is I need to care for the health and safety of my child. Any day that my kid walked into a classroom or an activity, there was a risk that a disease could be spread by an unvaccinated person. And because Rhett wasn't vaccinated, we were scared.
Yeah, tell me how you first started thinking about this, because I don't think it's something that would be necessarily front of mind for a lot of parents. The first thing that happened was that Rhett got sick, right?
So Rhett got sick. He's in the hospital. He's getting chemotherapy. He was 2.5, 3 years old. About a year into his treatment, well, maybe a few months into his treatment, we were in the hospital with Rhett, and my wife and I always did 24-hour shifts. And one night there was just a lot of kids. And I was up and I was walking in the hallway and I asked one of the nurses, I said, "Oh my gosh, what is going on?" I said, "Do all of these kids have cancer?" And she said, "Oh no, these kids don't have cancer." She said, "The normal pediatric ward downstairs is full. And so they brought them up here to the pediatric oncology floor because we have extra beds up here. These kids have pertussis. There's a pertussis outbreak." And I said, "A pertussis outbreak? I thought we vaccinated for that." She said, "That's the problem. These families, they don't vaccinate their kids." It was that day that I realized how risky it was. His older sister was in kindergarten. The doctor told us on the first day that our daughter Ainsley went to kindergarten was, "Hey, make sure when you go to school that your daughter goes into a classroom and check to see that all the kids are vaccinated."
They warned you.
Like our doctors at UCSF told us that. They warned us. They asked us. And then when it was Rhett's turn to go back to school, go to preschool and to kindergarten, they warned us of the same thing. And we went to the school, and that's when we learned that there wasn't much we could do. And the superintendent and the school told us, they said, "Look, the ones that aren't vaccinated, they may have medical exemptions like you, or they may have personal belief exemptions."
Rhett, when do you begin to have memories of being a kid, being well, being happy, being sick, thinking about infection, any of those things?
My first memories related to cancer and to infection and all that come when I was like probably 6 or 5. I remember like going into the hospital for checkups, but I don't really remember thinking about like infection or like infectious diseases much at all.
Because you didn't have to. Your parents were keeping you safe.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to go back to 2014. Rhett, you would be in elementary school, right? You'd be like 6, maybe first grade?
Yeah.
So you show up for elementary school. You're realizing, Carl, you're going to have to advocate for your kid. Were you surprised that the school was basically telling you, we can't control these exemptions from other kids? Like, was that a little bit shocking to you?
I don't know if shocking is the right word. It angered me. It just seemed counterintuitive to public health. What I didn't understand at the time was sort of the role of politics, if you will, the role of government in those types of decisions. And again, I didn't see the risk as acutely as some communities because our particular school district, the vaccination rate really wasn't that low. Meaning the risk in our particular school district wasn't that low and didn't scare us that much until measles.
So when did measles enter the picture for you?
Disneyland 2015. Because of his immune system, he was now vaccinated. And I was reading about the whole measles outbreak and everything. And I just curiously responded to a thread which said, "I'm really confused. They're telling me that kids can go to school without being vaccinated, but I'm not allowed to bring peanut butter to school because there are kids that are allergic to peanut butter. I didn't understand the logic. They allowed the kids that could bring measles to school to come to school, but they asked us not to bring the peanut butter to school.
You literally commented on this online, or you called into a call-in show?
Yeah, I commented this on an NPR story online. I'll never forget Lisa Alaferis, who was the public health reporter for KQED here in San Francisco. She picked up on it and she gave me a call and she said, hey, can we talk to you about this? And I told Rhett's story.
Rhett, how did they talk to you about this? Because I imagine you're like a little kid. So tell me about this time from your perspective.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly like what they told me and like sort of how much I knew, but I remember understanding the severity of what we were doing and what was going on and how few people were vaccinated. And I was understanding the severity of what that meant to me and to other people like me. I remember at school one time, this was I think first grade, and there were a couple kids in my class who were talking about vaccines, and they were saying like, oh, those are stupid. Like, we don't need those. And it's first grade. Like, they probably don't know what they're saying. But I remember like in that moment being like, I stood up to them and I was like, hey, like, they are important, like, for you guys to get vaccinated. And I probably didn't change anything, but I do remember that being like a moment for me where like I understood the severity of what they were and how important it is for me to speak and to share my story on the topic because vaccines save lives.
After the break, how Rhett and Carl changed the law. Could it be done today?
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. From improving emergency response times to protecting against cyber attacks, local, state, and federal governments are innovating with Google AI. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
It seems like there was this very compressed timeline to me, Carl, where you get this letter about measles. There's this outbreak at Disneyland. And then you start speaking, and there is quickly this push to shut down personal vaccine exemptions in California. Was it as compressed as I'm remembering it?
What you're talking about here was unprecedented. I mean, we had a public health emergency. And at that time, that public health emergency was less than 100 people got measles, right?
In the end, I think it was 125 across 7 states, which is so interesting because right now the outbreak is so much larger.
Huge, yeah. I mean, just in California alone today, in 2025, we have more measles cases today than we did in the entire year of 2024. But what was amazing at the time was there was a pediatrician who was a state senator at the time, Dr. Richard Pan, and he had already been working on this issue, and they didn't really have a lot of momentum, but they did have a lot of backbone. Like, they had the courage to keep pushing this issue. And so when Rhett came onto the scene, he put a face. They call him the poster boy or whatever it is, but he put a human face on that person that is alive, that person that can say, hey, save me.
Rhett wound up being a kind of unofficial spokesperson for a specific piece of legislation, SB 277. It removed personal belief as a legit reason to get a vaccine exemption. It's a little hard to imagine something like this passing today. Carl says even then, it had to be a perfect storm.
And so there were 3 or 4 variables that all sort of came together at that time. And of course, it was one of the top things in the media too. I mean, it was front page news that there was an outbreak at Disneyland. So because it was in the news, because there was already legislation introduced, it gave momentum for that. It also invigorated the anti-vax and those that are opposed to this type of legislation.
Yeah, did you ever have confrontations with those people?
I did get a lot of vitriol, in the social media, and I got text messages. I'll never forget, one of my coworkers actually at the time texted me telling me that I should be in jail and that I don't deserve to live, that I'm responsible for killing people.
How do you even respond to that? Like, go back to work with that person?
You don't. I mean, we just don't. I mean, there's no reason to respond to that. I mean, I had many verbal confrontations with those people, especially in the halls of the Capitol building in Sacramento.
What did that look like?
The day that Rhett testified in Sacramento, he testified in Sacramento in the Senate Education Committee, and then it went through the full Senate and then the Assembly. And then we went to Sacramento with this big petition, and he walked into the governor's office to deliver the petition, and they had a little press conference. And on the day that they went to have the final vote, Rhett and Jody, my wife, Rhett and Jody went to sit in the gallery to watch it. And they were going to sit upstairs, and I got a call from one of the state senator's office, and they said, hey, here's the thing. When you come in today, it's going to be filled with all these anti-vax people. We'd like you to meet us in a specific spot. We're going to walk you in a separate door, and we're going to have you sit down on the floor because we just want to make sure that, nobody gets hurt. And especially, Rhett, he's only 7 years old.
Carl, that must have just been freaky. Like, you're doing all of this to protect your son, and then the process of doing it brings out all of this vitriol towards you all.
It did. And again, that's the difficult part about it. And I think that's one of the things that we see in our current administration is just this threats and fears and the total gaslighting all over the place.
When SB 277 passed, do you remember that day? Was it like a big celebration? Like we did it.
So we celebrated that day. And I remember how quickly we saw the results. I mean, from that moment, in less than a year, vaccination rates in California went from, in some communities, 70 to 80%, all the way up to over 90, 95%. We got our herd immunity back. And for about 5 years, we did not see any of these infectious diseases or outbreaks that we had seen previously. And we really felt like we had that momentum. Then, of course, COVID hit and things turned upside down again with this whole vaccination debate.
I was thinking about the advocacy you did back with the outbreak in Disneyland, because of course we have an outbreak of measles right now and things are going very differently. And part of what's going differently is that families are speaking out about what's happening with this measles outbreak, but they're very different families than yours. Like if you go to the website for Children's Health Defense's anti-vaccine group, you can find interviews with families whose children have died of measles. And they're talking about that experience. There are 3 people who have died, and there's 2 families I've seen who have spoken out. The families I've seen, they're saying even though their children died, they don't advocate for vaccines. Quite the opposite. They think infection makes your body stronger, can help you later to fight off things like cancer. It's so dark to me. I wonder if you've noticed this flip too. It almost seems like the inverse of your family?
Well, I think what you're seeing is what I call false equivalency. I mean, we talk about and I think the media is, quite frankly, responsible for a lot of this. I mean, even for you to talk about sort of these fringe groups that are, tiny little parts of our society, there's always going to be individuals that are not interested in public health and safety. And then there are those that, think about choices that they make for their own families.
I guess I wonder, though, this outbreak could be a leverage point, the same way the Disneyland outbreak was a leverage point in 2015. But where's the Rhett Krawitt of today? Like, then where's the family, the child that will kind of seize people's attention the way that you did? Do you speak to families who want to be that family, or are maybe even scared to be that family because of what it could mean?
It's fear.
Huh. Why do you say that?
Don't get me wrong. We have felt that fear. There have been times where we have had to retreat. I mean, there is a real threat. People being, even in our community, there are people that are good friends and things like that. They just don't want to be in the political debate. This wasn't supposed to be a political issue. This was supposed to be an issue of health and safety. Like Health and Human Services and CDC and things like that. Yeah, it's part of our government. But it's not supposed to be a political issue. Even when I stood up for this and Rhett stood up for this at the time, it wasn't about politics. It was about health. And that's why I go back to in 2015, it wasn't, it was both sides of the political aisle. It was the extreme right and the extreme left. Like it was both, but not today. Those types of fringe arguments, resonate with people because they're very much cultural issues, and this was not supposed to be that, and it became that. And so to get somebody to speak up today, it becomes that person's identity. And I think that's one of the things about Rhett also is like, yeah, this is one thing he's spoken up for. He did it as a child. We wrote his speeches for him and everything, but it's not who he is. He's not out there being this divisive political rhetoric person. He's a kid. He's learning. He's going to go to college. We need politicians and elected officials with a moral core, a backbone. They have an ethical imperative.
I think it's important to underline the political part of this, just because part of what made your effort successful 10 years back, it wasn't just about speeches and Rhett being cute. It was the fact that legislators acted on it. It was the fact that a law was passed that required people to do something that maybe they didn't want to do, but the politicians led their constituents through it. And that's how Marin County ended up with one of the higher vaccination rates in the state.
Like I said, I didn't expect this thing to be political, but what I know is that there are certain things that government has to do because not enough people will do them on their own unless the government enforces it. Traffic laws are the best example. I mean, we put up stop signs for a reason, to create some order. We have seatbelts, we have car seats, we have these things because they keep us safe. And we have government there to regulate and to make sure that people do that, because if only a few people don't do it, if only a few people are not allowed to do it, it causes harm to others.
Rhett, can I tap you in here? I'm a little bit curious because you're 17 now. You swim in a different media environment than your dad and I grew up in. And I'm curious your take about whether you think if there was a Rhett Krawitt of today, whether it would work in the same way.
I think it would be able to happen, but it would be a very different process.
How so?
I think that you would have to push into social media way more than we did. I don't think that you can get any sort of change just through conventional media. You have to have a bit of luck when it comes to social media. You have to get your thoughts, your ideas out to more people. But I think it's very difficult to get that through social media without like it being almost a full-time job.
Yeah. I wonder too about just because of how media works right now, whether people would question the authenticity of a Rhett Krawitt of today. They'd be like, oh, it's a kid,
100%. I think that the thing about social media is that anything that anybody says about it is available to everybody. The ideas coming from whoever the speaker is aren't always getting to everybody.
Yeah. If you met a little kid who was like 6 or 7 today who wanted to do what you did, what would you tell them?
I think it starts small and then find something to make it big and go big. You can't just try and talk to everybody. I mean, it's kind of untested waters right now.
Carl, Rhett, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm grateful for your time.
Thanks for telling our story.
Thank you for having me.
Carl and Rhett Krawitt live in Marin County, California. These days, Rhett is thinking about college. All right, that's our show. Before you get out of here, make sure you check out this conversation we dropped into the feed back on Friday. I talked to Slate's Ayman Ismail. We talked about his new book, which is about being Muslim in America, and the rise of New York City's Zohran Mamdani. It's great. But here's the thing. If you want to listen, you have to be a Slate Plus subscriber. But it's really easy to do that. You can do it right in Apple Podcasts, if that's where you listen, or sign up at slate.com/whatnext. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
Mom and Dad, the school supplies you buy me this year will mostly end up in my mouth. Maybe shop low prices for school at Amazon, so I don't eat up all your money. Just something to chew on. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.